Hello YouTubers or YouTube patrons. We have another episode, but this time we're going to try to keep the episode vlog style and a lot shorter and a lot to the point, because I'm not necessarily doing reviews right now. I will be putting up some reviews soon, but I just wanted to do some quick DIY stuff. Now you're thinking to yourself, geez, that's a messy table. And partially you would be correct. Now for us to get into today's subject, one of the first things I was going to point out is the worst thing that you're ever going to have a deal with when you're working on something. It doesn't matter whether it's a computer, whether you're mowing the lawns, working with power tools, etc. is if you all of a sudden have a loss of power and you don't know what the hell is going on. Why this is terrible is it could mean two things, either, or at least one, at least out of the two things that I can think of anyway, sorry, my bad. It could mean a number of things, but let's just say for these purposes it usually means two things. Either something has happened on your main switch, so fuse blown is another option, but usually something has happened on your main switch, so you probably need to go check that out. In some cases, yes, something has slipped out. Most cases, no. The other issue is the cable has been severed. Now, if that's what has happened, you should be thanking your lucky stars that maybe the fuse has tripped, or at least the power has tripped anyway. Because again, things like this happen and next step could be tragic. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about maybe how to repurpose some of these cables that have been severed and that have been laying around your house. I've got quite a few. I find myself doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm one of those few people that have a lot more electric stuff than fuel-based stuff. So even my lawnmower is still very much electric, along with my whippersnippers, edges in some regions, cutters and things like that. For the most part are electric. And most people would say, well, that's not very efficient, or it's not very portable, I guess is the best choice of words, and correct. But then there are going to be a lot of jobs that require you to even have a generator or something, and you're probably going to need some length of cable, because the noise that the generator is going to make and maybe where you're going to be working are two different areas. So what do you do then? So I'm not saying that this is electric is the best solution to everything. I'm just saying that, you know, sometimes also it becomes a cost measure. It becomes a cost issue, because one of the things is people are renting properties. Some people don't necessarily want to spend $300 or $400 on a petrol mower or any other mower that uses gas or whatever the case may be. Some people just want something that's worth $50, and sometimes they're also mowing just a very short or small little area, patch of land, etc. And so it's not cost effective as well. The maintenance that is required to maintain an engine versus maybe just an electric mower, usually when you're done with it or it's toast, you just toss it. So with that being said, anyway, here we are. I'm here with a few cables. But before I get into the cables, first let me create some light for us so that we can actually see what we're going to be doing. That's usually a good start. And yes, this table is full of stuff at the moment because I'm working on my dining room table, as I needed a bit of more room to work. So first let's create some light so that we can actually see. How's that? Hopefully not too many reflective surfaces when looking at the video. Perfect. Okay, so we've got really good brightness here. Alright, we've got 3 different cables, big cables, so you're talking about 10 to 20 meters. We're going to need some electric tape. That usually helps. And we're going to need different, I guess, heat shrink. Now, I would recommend this heat shrink for different projects. Maybe we can do a review on this later. I bought this from a local shop here in Australia called Jaycar. It's a franchise that usually deals with just small electronics, things like that, little kits for electronics and then hobbyists and things of that nature. This uses, I think, some sort of butane or something like that. We don't need that. We'll use a heat gun just to make this a little bit easier on us. So we'll put this kit aside. We'll just use some simple heat shrink, different tubing, different sizes, and we'll go with the sizes as we go. This is very much a cheap little set. I think I purchased this from Costco. Not Costco, sorry, from Bunnings, local hardware store down here. Now, when it comes to strippers, you're going to have different variations of strippers. Obviously, I just need something that can cut, crimp, and do a whole bunch of stuff because we're going to be mucking around cables. So again, the different use case scenarios are going to be different. But I'm going to use this mainly to cut all this protective coating. Because again, when we're talking about the thickness of some of these cables, they're fairly thick. Now, is this going to be as thick as that? No. This is cheaper gauge compared to this. This is some really hardcore stuff. But in saying that, as hardcore as it can be, Ritchie is just a bit more hardcore. And this is what Ritchie did. Now, what I liked about this particular one is because you had a kill switch, right? But now I'm going to have to toss this and replace this bit at least and try to figure out something else that is safer to use, because I don't think this is safe enough to have around the house. Yeah. So that's one cable. This one, I think I was mowing or doing something, or I was working the power tool and something happened and the line got severed, or someone was carrying something across it and cut the line. And that's just an old mowing cable. That's also got the same issues where, again, after a while, because of the way some of these mowers work, some of these heads of the female part of it for some reason just keeps cutting out. And I'm trying to work out what the hell is going on. And I just don't know, so I'm going to try and at least bring it back to life or repurpose it in some way, shape or form. So what I did do is, because these cables are a lot more expensive in terms of, because per meter, sometimes they come with a reel, sometimes they don't. What we're going to do is we're going to work with a donor. So I went and bought just $2 simple little thing. It does what it needs to do. I'm going to be replacing some of these ends and at least trying to actually extend the life of some of these units. So that's the main plan. So we've got lights, we've got most of the things that we will need, including power. Hopefully we don't zap ourselves. We won't. I'm not going to plug anything. I'm not going to commit suicide on YouTube. So one of my favorites is the Duratec, as I mentioned before. Why? Because it's razor sharp. What we're looking for here is the razor sharpness. Because again, we're going to be splicing up some ends just so that we can actually see what the hell we're going to be snipping. It's got a locking mechanism. And so the cutting part of it is what we're really looking for. So that's really all I wanted. Otherwise I would have to use a separate blade and all that, and I just wasn't feeling that. So I'm just going to lightly just rotate this. And in most cases that should, yeah, that should have most of that out. Okay, not quite. Need to do it a little bit lighter and hope I don't cut the cables that are inside, because this is sharp. Perfect. Okay. Is that long enough? We'll see. We'll see. Let's figure that out as we go. Let's try and get sort of the same sort of distance and see how we go. I prefer normally to do it with something else, but you know, sometimes you have to work with what's available to you. So in terms of just basic stripping, you know what? You can use this stripper. I think this stripper does it. It's a stripper that I had from Craft-Rite. It's one of those that adjusts and crimps well as well. I'm not going to try to go too hard on this cable. I don't want it to fray too much. So what I wanted to do, so I just wanted to get this done just enough. Yeah. Okay, maybe that's a bit too loose. Still. Okay, that's spot on. There we go. So I think, yeah, I'd say, you know what, that's good enough. We don't want it too long anyway, for obvious reasons, because that will just create problems later. We want them just at the right length. What we want to use them for anyway. So that, always be careful with some of these tools. You will lose a finger if you're not careful, you know, slice off some skin and it's not a fun day. Alright, so we've got one side done. We've got another side to go. Sometimes it doesn't quite get it right. Maybe just because of the thickness of the cable. This is normally something I use for thinner cables, but for what I'm purposing it for now, there we go, better. Just want a bit of length there. There we go. And finally, there we go. Alright, so next step is probably to find the right sort of tubing. Now, because these cables are not the biggest cables, I'll say this is good enough. And this is 20, this is 3.5 mil, 4 millimeters. Yeah, 40 millimeters, sorry. I'd say that's on point. Might go a little bit smaller. Let's see. Let's see, what's this? Let me just do a quick check on this and see if that's going to be, pardon my hands are a little bit shaky. Yeah, I would say that's pretty good. Alright, I'll say that's pretty good. So, I guess the best measurement, it's a bit finicky getting it through there, but best measurements would be 2.5 mils and 40 mils. So what I'm going to do, because I did cut this a bit too close, what I'm going to do is just give this a bit more room to elbow, just so that way we've got a bit more room to dance. I'll say about the same. I'd say about the same distance. There we go. Get that out of there. Oh, there we go. Because you know, just that sort of length gives you enough room to elbow when you're sorting out these cables. That's all. You don't want it to be in the way too much. And maybe I'll get the same length the other way. I didn't want it to be that long, but sure. Let's just do that. Just to give us a bit more room to play with. Sometimes I want them nice and close, just so that way the cable doesn't start to bend in that particular spot anyway. There we go. Alright, so we'll put the cable down here, or at least I should have made one longer and one shorter, and that would have been fine. But so for now, I'm just going to make sure that the tubing can actually go through. I think that's the most important part here. So what we'll do, oops, perfect. So why that you want to do that is to make sure that when it's time to splice the two cables together, you've actually got room to work with. See if I can pull that better. I might even cut them in half if I have to, in terms of lengthwise, if I see that the length is a bit much. But what I'm trying to do is get the cables to interconnect like that. hopefully, some people would even say solder, but I don't know about all that. Depending on what you're trying to do and what exactly you're trying to do, this is just supposed to be quick DIY. So the problem there now, too thick. So bringing us back to slightly bigger tubing. So slightly bigger but shorter, I think. Let's try. I would say about the same. So because it brought us back to this particular tubing, which is the 3.5 times 40 mil, what we'll do is we'll go back again. We're just going to put it back in the scissor mode and try it again. Now other people use other tools to tighten up this, that's fine. We can use pliers or something like that if you have them on deck. If I do, I'll see if I can pull up. But for me, generally, I think I can get away with it by hand. That's just to help tighten. Get them to interweave properly and just make sure that everything is on point. Wish I had some long nose pliers. Not cutting it, but just tightening it up a little bit. Ah, perfect. These ones have a few grips, perfect. So what I'm just trying to do is make sure that's pretty good and on point. And then slide that, please go right through. Hope it's not too thick. Should be alright. I don't know why. There we go. Better. So what we're hoping is sort of you get that. In fact, if anything, I would prefer this side the most because that's the shorter side, giving us room to work with. Okay. Maybe even there, just dead in the middle, a little bit of room there. So same thing would apply to the other cables. Yeah. So about there, dead in the middle, I'd say. Now back to the 3.5 we talked about. The length is this side. So 3.5, because the 2.5 might just be a bit too thin. Right, so once again, scissor mode, getting into interlock and doing whatever works for you. Making sure that everything is nice and secure, because that's the biggest hurdle here, is to try to repurpose and make sure that everything is nice and secure, because the last thing that we want is for these things to split mid-action, again potentially exposing people to wires, and that's a no-go. Some people would say, hey, toss them, but again, these are not cheap. Some of these electric extension cables can go up to hundreds of dollars, same with reels and all that other stuff. So you just have to make sure that you get the most out of your product. Yeah, this one might be a little bit tough because there's a bit of a knot there. It's a bit too tight. See if we can press it down. It's fidgety. All right. go. There we go. All right. We're cooking with gas, just making sure that everything is on point. Sometimes, like I said, the thickness, but that's a good sign because at least we know that it's covered. Last one. Sometimes the length feels a little bit off, but sometimes you need room to elbow it just in case things go awry. But so far, and yes, some of these softer wires sometimes can get into the skin, and boy does it hurt. Boy does it hurt. Like I said, the whole purpose of me just interlocking them is to just make sure that everything is nice and secure. You know, they're not just going to slip. You know, everyone is going to have different methods, but I'm just using my method just to make sure that everything is nice and secure and doesn't give you problems later on. Need another camera angle for this kind of stuff, you know, maybe a top-down angle or something, which we'll be working on soon, just so that way you guys can see everything in its entirety. But yeah, we good. We Gucci, as they say. All right. It's usually that part, and that's a good thing anyway, because you kind of want that bit of resistance, because at least it shows that it's covering what it needs to cover. So, okay. All right. So this is what we have. So the heating part of it is where things get a little bit interesting. You need to be careful with these. Some people use blow dryers, etc. I just don't think they can get the blow dryer gets hot enough. I have something old school. This is just a simple heat gun. I think I would have bought this from Bunnings or some random hardware store. There's not too much in terms of paperwork or anything that you need to know. By the time you're getting one of these, you know what you're already planning to do and why you're trying to do it. This is 2000 watts. Hopefully my power is good enough. Sometimes indoors you never know. The plugs don't allow it to go crazy. Alright, let's see. Hopefully this is not on. Surely it is on. The last thing that I wanted to do is melt something. Alright, so we have power. Now, cable by cable. This has two modes. Number one, if y'all can see that, number one, number two. We'll just go with number one for now because I don't think we really need that much heat. Oh yeah. So what we just want is for this to nicely wrap around like that. As you all can see that looks nice and secure. And I would say we Gucci. Okay, let's just hope that the shrink doesn't melt or go through. No, obviously that should be good. It's designed with that in mind. It's a little bit warm. We'll wait for that to cool down. In fact, while that cools down, I'll be sorting out the tape. Because now we've brought back one cable to life. Now it just so happens that this cable had a bit that was just a bit kinky right there. So what I'll do is I'll grab some scissors real quick. There we go. Well, that's cooling down. Yep, almost done. Like I said, the length is always one of those points of contention. Normally I'll prefer it to be a little bit shorter, just so that way you don't have to muck around too much, but hey, you do what you do. Of course, there are better ways to bridge this. I've seen other small little bridge things that you can sort of place, and they make that even more secure, and you can screw bits in from one end and then screw bits in the other. That's another way to do it. There are always multiple methods to do it, but we're just talking about someone who's off the grid here and trying to save some money, or who just doesn't have access to a lot of this stuff on the fly. You're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to have time to get to all the special little nubs and all that, so this is just a quick fix to a major problem, because again, power. Always have a problem finding these, especially when I slice straight. Just going to take that a bit more, just to make sure I can reinforce it. There we go. That's just to make sure, because that bit was too much tension there, especially when you're mowing or doing something like that. You're probably going to bend it a little bit, so we just usually want to give this enough room to work. So that's cooled off significantly. What I'm going to do, just to make sure that the heat shrink and everything didn't heat up too much and there was too much stuffing around, what I'll do is I'll tape these individually, just a bit of tape just to reinforce them. I'd say about that much, just to make sure that, you know, the bit where the wiring is nice and separated and isolated, and then worry about taping up the rest of the pack as we go. It's not perfect, but anyway, what we're trying to do here is actually get the main coating perfect, just so that you can match that sort of plastic shell. I think individually it's great, because at least that way, if something was to happen, say a loose little copper wire or something managed to make its way out or prick through one of these, at the very least it's not going to spark and short out everything. That's one thing you don't want to do. Okay, so now that we've got the main bit done, now we can work on taping up the whole thing and seeing what we can get out of this. I would say maybe give this a bit of run up to it. Oops. There. It's unveiling, you know, it's unwrapping too quickly. I wanted it to unwrap tightly like that. There. So what I'm trying to do is keep everything nice and bundled up close. I wish this was a smaller tape, something a bit tighter in terms of the way it wraps, but it's all good. We'll make it work. It feels like I'm the one that's actually twisting more to get it to manipulate the way I want it to. Maybe I need to control how it releases. Yeah, there we go. Not perfect, but let's see what we can do. If we need to go over it a bit more, we will. We'll try again, because what I want is for that not to flex as much. I want it to be a bit more solid. So next time I'll use something that pulls a bit more as well, because it just doesn't feel as tight when I'm working the cable. That's all right. Anyway, that's how we're cooking now. So best way to check out if this works is let's test the light. It's the best way to check. So kaboom. So we brought that back, which is great, and I don't feel any heat or anything else. So at least now we can repurpose it for something else, and every time someone tries to bend the cable, at least we know that we've got enough room to elbow. That's really what we were after here, is just giving it a bit of room to elbow from that bit, so that hopefully that doesn't slip out anymore. So that's one cable down. Now, we were talking about donor cables before, and we were talking about the one that had a nice switch to it. Again, I don't know what's available at every hardware store. I'm just talking about things that you can do at home. Obviously, even the stuff that I'm doing now just has extra equipment around it, but in most cases, most people don't even have that much stuff. They just have a bit of tape, they have a bit of this and this. And so me, I just thought, hey, electric tape, because again, we're messing around with electricity. As I was saying before, donor cables. So one of the biggest issues here is we've got this really nice cable, but because my buddy Richie, I don't know what was going on, maybe anxiety on his behalf, just decided, hey, let me chew. So because he decided, hey, let me chew, I've got a bolt cutter here somewhere. I can use any of these cutters, but I just thought I might as well use the bolt cutter, since this is just meant for heavier, thicker gauge, because there is a difference, obviously, just by looking at these cables, you can see there's a difference in terms of thickness. So this is much more for heavy duty cable, etc. But what we're trying to do here is just fix a problem. Now, obviously, most people will be like, hey, make sure you don't plug in the wrong thing and zap yourself. I will, but at the same time, you've got a black stripe on this cable, so pretty secure. So what we're trying to do here is there's a bit that's already open here, so I can work with that. Maybe use that as the entry point, I guess. And then what we'll do is we'll work our way from there. Wow, too wide. So I'm going to have to use you, and hopefully you're not as wide. That's what I meant by razor sharp. So look at how much you would have to get through just to get in there. So that's a good thing. The thicker the better in most cases. There we go. All right. So the cables are a little bit stuffed up here and there, but not too bad. Okay, that's a starting point. I probably should have had a bit more, but that's okay. It's fine. I should have given that a bit more, but we'll work with what we have. So strippers, that's so wrong. I know. I'm even thinking about what I just said. Wire strippers. Wire strippers. Ooh. Refusing, and I'm trying to work out why. There we go. All right, so we've got a starting point. So because we're going to be working with a donor, normally I would prefer it to be as close to that as possible, but for obvious reasons we need room to work with. So I'm going to give it maybe a hand or so, just to make sure that we've got space. Just so that way, this should be able to be cut by the bolt cutter because it's not as wide. No, still. I want to keep using this that way because, again, we don't want it to blunt. There might be a way to sharpen it, who knows. But at least we've got room to elbow here. We've got room to work with. We're probably going to cut up top of that bit. Now, hopefully that should be enough for what we're trying to do. If not, I'll extend. Maybe I'll extend this side because this side is a little bit hardcore compared to that because that's very soft. So use this side. Give it a bit more length to play with. It is a very thick cable. Not quite. Not quite. There we go. Yeah, better. Alright, so once again, I think this is the best. Just feels like it's the right sort of length and gives us room to work with. So the plan here is to put this in and slap it backwards. I'd say about there, yeah. Maybe a bit too close to home, but it's fine. Should be good enough for what we're trying to do. Again, like I said, they're sort of like pigtail sort of things that you can sort of muck around with. You can find them in hardware stores anywhere. But this is mainly for people who are out somewhere and just need to fix up an emergency situation and get that done. There's a bit more room to trying to get myself geared up for PC building, so I better get used to mucking around with wires because things are about to get hectic soon. I don't build PCs very often. When I do, jeez, I've been out of the game for a minute. So let's see what happens when it happens. So be very careful because sometimes you might put your finger in there and the last thing that you want to do is slice off your finger or at least slice some skin off. It won't be a fun day. I can tell you that. So hopefully we can splice those two together. Should have enough space in the heat shrink or heat tubing rather. Pulling it down just so that way we've got a bit more room to work with. Interlock. going to make a foreskin joke, but I'm not, because not even close. Not even close. Yeah, perfect. Alright, I'd say maybe that should be good enough. Hopefully that gives it room to, yeah, that gives it a bit of room to elbow. Tubing. And who knows what I will do with the male side of it anyway. At some point something else might get destroyed or damaged and you might have to repurpose it and use it for something else. You might need to provide power to something directly or something like that. And 2 meters, you know, you've got about 1.5 meters to work with, so that's usually pretty good. An element or something like that that maybe might just not have a cable or something that it came with, and you can always muck around with that. There are always things that you can do and then lock it in, put it in a proper plug if you want to. I don't really see those very often here in Australia, but in Africa, definitely. Come across things with no plugs, and you'd have to sort of add the plug and the fuse by yourself, and like I said, you don't see that very often out here, most things for the most part. But if you're working on something by yourself, that could be a good way to repurpose that and make the most of it. Like I said, it's a shame that I'm losing the master switch in terms of what I can work with and what I can't. But actually I'll nip a little bit because I feel like sometimes some of these cables are a tad too long. So I'll nip that just to give it enough room so that way when we heat shrink it, it won't come into contact with anything else. I don't think that one's going to come yet. That's got heaps of distance. Perfect. But just in case, actually, I'll nip a little bit. It's the last thing that you want. Kaboom. There we go. So, safety first, my friends. Safety first. And last but not least, Mr. Blue. Shaky hands. And no, I'm not a smoker. Not that much of a coffee drinker either, so it's not that. It's just probably just shaky hands. It happens after a while. And it's very hard to pull back. But we're close enough. I was about to say ouch because it did hurt. Say maybe slice up, I'd say about that much, and I think you're Gucci. Oh no, oh no, that unraveled hard. I used too little on one end, maybe. Let's try to see what happened there. Not trying to tighten anything, I'm just trying to make sure that we're good first. Okay, I think we should be okay. Hopefully that doesn't unravel. I don't think so, but you never know. Okay, so this is how we're looking at right now. And once again, heat gun. I can tell you that's definitely hot. Okay, I'd say that's fairly hot and tight. So we just have to wait for that to cool down, but hopefully we now have a solid donor. And while that sort of happens, what I will do, actually I'll wait for a second. Actually, I should have a little brush here. Where did I put it? Oops. Where did I put it? There we go. That should allow me to just scoop everything once I'm done. I'll just find a dustpan and we'll move on. Camera might not be able to pick up some of those softer wires, but I can see them everywhere. Last thing you want is to swallow something like that in your food. I'm just doing it at the dining room table. But there you go. Now, where was I? Still warm, but okay. Let's see what we can do in terms of trying to get these done individually. Hopefully, because again it's such thicker cable down there, the tension is not going to be too much on it, that's all. That's my biggest concern. But with the heat shrink anyway, that should help. Like I said, the small part is just to protect, just to make sure that, you know, a wire or something doesn't stick out and end up sparking into, creating unnecessary problems for all the parties involved. Last thing you want to do is this thing touches water or water touches this thing and kaboom. Not necessarily blow up, but you're gone. That's basically the kaboom part. The bomb would be cooler, but you know. Getting zapped by an outlet is not a good way to go, I don't think. So, because I've got two of them that are already fully covered. What I can do is now focus on this. This time I'm going to create the tension myself. Create the tension myself, and hopefully we can wrap up this video. That one I can deal with it some other time. I can do it afterwards, but this is just the main one that we're looking at. The one thing I will say about these things is if you can find a reel for these things, better, because just a good way to store them rather than sort of having them gathered up the way they are now. Now, we're going for the complete. Hopefully that should be enough. Start off here. Work our way. Might just fall short, but that should be okay, because the other side was actually done very well to begin with. And I would say we're cooking with gas, I would say. I think that's a good tension point, because that feels significantly tighter. So I'd say cooking with gas, definitely. Give it a test and see how we go. Where are we? So our light switch is that one. And where are we? Not used to that. There we go. So please, if you enjoyed any of this, and if you want to know where to get some of this stuff, I'll try put most of the descriptions below. Some of these I've had them for ages, but some of them I got them recently, so I'll try my best to look up where I found some of this stuff. Most of this stuff is cheap stuff. $5 for the heat shrink. I would say, you know, this cable by itself, I think I walked into a hardware store, it was $2.80 for what I'm using it for. Like I said, at some point, if someone decides that they want to use something else with the front bit, with the male side of it, and then we can just always hardwire it or solder it, that would be great. And lock it into place just to make sure it doesn't break off or something like that. But really, it was essentially just to get rid of this kind of stuff. The last thing that you want are exposed wires, because we know that this creates problems. You don't want that. So, but this is essentially a good way to sort of go. So, like I said, any comments would be greatly appreciated. Like, subscribe, and I guess I'll talk to you soon. We'll talk about cleaning out a PC that a friend gave me, and hopefully trying to bring it back to life and see what we can do with it. Hopefully it's a decent to lower level editing machine at the very least, and maybe, you know, a medium gaming machine. You never know. We'll talk about it then, and if at some point we need to do an update, we will. Thank you very much. I guess I'll see you in the next one.